This is VolcaKnowledge, the podcast where we explore how volcanoes interact across nature, culture, and society. I'm your host, volcanologist Sam Mitchell, and every episode I'll be joined by a new guest to get their unique perspective on the world of volcanoes and geology through the eyes of art, history, media, education, industry, and so much more. If you're watching, thanks for watching. If you're listening, thanks for listening. Remember, you can catch all of our episodes on many streaming platforms. Let's go and meet our guest. Enjoy the episode. Volcanic rocks have been used as building materials and for infrastructure throughout history and in many places still today. But where does that material actually come from and how is it used? So today our subject is quarrying and the quarrying industry. So I'm joined today by Ben Dormer, who's the Operations Director for Wainwright Aggregates, who operate a quarry of volcanic rock in the southwest of England and who are also one of our sponsors. Hello, Ben. Thank you for joining us on VolcaKnowledge today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really great to branch out into something more industrial and within this podcast. There's a lot of different subjects we've covered, but we've not actually touched this subject yet of physically volcanic rocks being used as materials and being extracted from the ground, which has happened for a very long time. So it'd be great to hear a bit about you and your background and how you got into this, and then we can go more on to Wainwright themselves and what they do.
Sure, no problem. Happy to expand on that with you.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you've found yourself where you are today.
Yeah, so it's probably fair to say it's sort of it's been by accident. I've been in this industry just over 20 years now. But if I think back to prior to entering the industry, I really didn't know a tremendous amount or perhaps anything really about it. And it was by chance. So after, during my, if I think back to my school days, geography, I took at A level and I enjoyed that, particularly physical geography. But finished my A levels, took a gap year, did a bit of travelling, and came back none the wiser. Really, ended up going to university in a completely different industry, or sort of targeting a completely different industry, really based on sort of family history. One that I didn't actually want to be a part of, but nevertheless didn't have any other direction. And at the end of that process, and after getting into some debt, as everyone does at university, although I will say it's not quite as much debt as these days, I ended up sort of deciding, right, you know what, that is not what I want to do. And an opportunity came up locally within a mineral extraction company for what I thought at the time would have been a summer job, just to start trying to pay off my overdraft and everything else. So did that for a year, working in the logistics side of our industry, and again didn't know a tremendous about it, but sort of knowledge started to grow. And that was to do with, let's say, transport and logistics in an office environment, just within a local company to where I sort of grew up. Still had some itchy feet though, so ended up saving up a few pennies and travelling to sort of Southeast Asia and Australia. Then whilst I was away, sent an email to my ex sort of manager asking if there was any opportunities upon my return, when I'd effectively spent all my money, and there was an opportunity as a sort of an operational environment within an asphalt operation in Bristol. And not having any funds on my return, I thought, yeah, do you know what, that'll be good. Did that for a bit. Didn't actually like the operational activities that I was undertaking, sort of, practically mixing asphalt and operations. So there was an opportunity within that organisation, one of our industry competitors now, that there was an opportunity to work within a sand and gravel operation as a supervisor of a sand and gravel mineral extraction area within the Cotswolds. This enabled me to move on from that job after probably about a year, and I started working within, say, sand and gravel extraction within the Cotswolds, and then I was able to progress within that organisation. There was, training and exposure to the industry, and I ended up probably 3 quarries within that area, sort of moving around. And that company I actually worked for 12 years. They gave me a tremendous amount of development and opportunity. I then moved from sand and gravel to sand extraction, to another sand and gravel quarry. Then got, I'll say, itchy feet. I wanted to get more exposure to the industry and develop myself, and managed to transfer into what I would refer to within our industry as hard rock mineral extraction, so drilling and blasting to win that mineral from the ground. So sort of became an assistant manager at I think at the time, just over 1 million ton a year quarry
Wow.
back in the Mendips, just south of Bristol Airport, and worked there for a couple of years, and then an opportunity to work in as a quarry manager in the south of Devon presented itself. So I went down there, ran that for a couple of years. That was a limestone deposit, as was the previous one. Then exposure to a different organisation after a number of years, sort of moving around a little bit. Ended up going to a large quarry back in the Mendip area that does sort of 5 to 6 million tons a year, working within that environment, which was high production output, again, of a limestone deposit. Again, a couple of years doing that. And then I found myself moving to John Wainwright Co Limited, the company I work for today. Worked for them for about 5 years as the quarry manager. And this was my first sort of exposure to what we would sort of term, well, it's locally traded, and most people refer to it as a basalt, but it's actually a Silurian andesite that we extract here. And it was my first exposure to this mineral and the challenges associated with working this. I've done that for 5 years or so, and now I am the operations director of this business, and that also has, whilst it still has the aggregates department, which is arguably my background and the bit that I probably enjoy the most, is winning that mineral. But I'm also responsible for asphalt operations, which is what I did 20 years ago and sort of moved away from. So now I find myself back in charge of that area, as well as a couple of other little smaller parts of the business as well. So that's a little bit about me and my sort of career history.
Cool. As you say, there's a huge variety in what actually goes on within this industry in terms of the roles, the logistics, and as you mentioned there, spending quite a lot of bit of time down in southwest England. I don't think people appreciate sometimes just how big an industry quarrying is, because I think people think they should see it wherever they go. If it was happening, you'd be able to visualize it. But I've been to your sites for Wainwright, and if people didn't tell you, or if you weren't, abjectly looking for the sign, you wouldn't know it's there, because quarries nowadays actually do a very good job of making themselves hidden if they can, particularly if you're going down and you're not having to go into, some topographic high, a mound as such. So I think it's very surprising sometimes where actually quarrying exists, and there's a huge amount of it in this area of the Mendips in southwest England in Somerset.
Yeah, that's correct. And I don't know the exact numbers, and they will vary from year to year, subject to the economic condition within the UK and locally. But I think that the Mendip region is second only to sort of, I think, Derbyshire Midlands within the UK for mineral extraction. So there are a number of large operations in that neck of the woods. But this area that I work within. You could throw a net over us all effectively. There's a number of operators within this area that supply not only the local geographic area, but beyond, when there's sort of rail links, etc.
Yeah, and it's not just John Wainwright and Co in the area as well. How many different quarrying companies exist in the area?
So there are a couple of smaller operators. We're an independent quarry operator, and there are a couple of other small independent quarry operators within this area. But also we have what would be arguably international companies, or what we would probably refer to as the national operators, that have multiple operations throughout the UK and beyond, and they have operations in this area as well. So we're all competing within this market because the mineral is within this area and it's recognised as a an important resource. I think that the economic benefits. There are clearly companies that are winning this mineral and doing the mineral extraction, but beyond that, that ripples out to the wider economy, for the jobs associated with it. I think, and again, I'm not, I probably shouldn't sort of, I wouldn't like to be quoted on this, but my understanding is that the retail sector, so, sales and shopping is probably the number one industry in the area, but second to that, mineral extraction is the largest employer within the region. Not necessarily just the companies, but all of the haulage, all of the engineering, all of the sort of bolt-on industries that sort of feed off of it.
Yes, exactly, and I think that's something we might have we might be coming on to later as well. But at this point, there's more to quarrying than physically being essentially in the hole in the ground and bringing material out. There is an entire web of logistics, as you say, and we can go through that process later on. But even down to administrative tasks, sales, marketing, dealing with clients and stakeholders. There's a huge amount of basically opportunities. And as you say, for an area which is very rural, there are some towns scattered around, and you have the city of Bristol about an hour away and Bath close by. For opportunities for for local employment, there really is quite a lot of support, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one of the things that I think that we recognise as well as our competitors, that that there is that local resource. We certainly utilise it, but we're able to provide employment opportunities and development for people on the back of what we do. So it's a big part of the local area.
Yeah, so you mentioned a bit about some of the geology you've worked in, and a lot of what you mentioned was limestone, which is pretty prevalent over a lot of southwest of England, just based on the age of the geology around where we are, so stretching from the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian sort of period. So we're looking at rocks that are 200, 300, 400 million years old in a lot of cases. But the special thing about what John Wainwright and Co are working with is that, as you said, it's not technically a basalt, it's a Silurian andesite. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this rock, why it's such a, I guess, almost coveted material in this industry.
Yeah, sure. It's regionally important, and it's identified within the Somerset's minerals as regionally important, not only within their sort of I can't remember the term, but effectively the land bank of mineral to extract, but that is sort of separate to the general limestone. And really, one of the major benefits of the Silurian andesite extraction area, and we're fairly fortunate that there's this outcrop within a sort of sea of limestone around us, and there's this small sort of slither, if you like, of this mineral that we're
Relatively small. It's a very big site.
Yes, yeah. No, I'm thinking sort of within the region.
Within the regional scale.
But yeah, I mean the site, and I want to say that the site is approximately 2 kilometres, sort of roughly, if you were to say sort of east to west, perhaps southeast to southwest, and it goes in a strip, and it's about 2 kilometres that we operate within, and that's the area of extraction that we. But it's sort of bordered to the north and the south, so we've got this area that we're working in the middle. And one of the major benefits of the rock type is it's what we would refer to within our industry as its PSV, which stands for the polished stone value, and it's 55 PSV, and the limestones typically are in the 40s. And what this PSV, the real benefit to that is within the roads and the surface that you'll find that vehicles drive along. That higher PSV polished stone value is what that refers to, and as the vehicles go across it, they will wear away that surface. And a limestone typically, whilst it might be fairly durable, it tends to smooth, and it tends to sort of it doesn't have the sort of the grip that you will find with a higher PSV. So from a safety perspective for vehicles, if you're on and it was wet conditions on a worn road of limestone, then there's the potential for a vehicle to not be able to brake as quickly and effectively as it is with a higher PSV aggregate on that surface that retains the grip, so that you're actually able to the friction there, and you'll slow the vehicle down more effectively. So typically on that top road surface, then you use a higher PSV aggregate.
So it's a real benefit to having a volcanic rock in the area for, as you said, not only its durability, but for safety, for grit. And I think anybody who's probably, climbed or bouldered could also probably tell you similar things about volcanic rocks versus limestones.
Yeah.
Limestones will smooth themselves out actually very, very
Exactly.
easily over time, despite being very, very solid. So it's interesting to hear that from the perspective of actual infrastructure as well, that it applies the same.
Yeah, and and it's one of those things from a sustainability point as well, that it's making sure that that road surface, from our point of view, when you put it in there, it lasts for as long as possible. So the environmental impact of it means that you don't need to spend resource, time, energy replacing that time and time again. It should have a longer impact, so it's a better product.
Even though that means potentially less business, but it's a better
Well,
quality
what I would
product, so
say,
it lasts for longer.
I take your point. What I would say is it's probably more business for us, less business for them for the road surface. But there'll be other
Interesting.
areas that are limestone benefits, and they're able to exploit the benefits of that geology within the markets that we perhaps
Right,
can't
okay.
tap into.
Because so it's just Wainwright that operates within the volcanic site, isn't
Correct.
it? So you've got your own hold on that particular geological
Yeah.
site.
Yeah, so it gives us a slight advantage. The other thing is, they will bring in other higher PSV aggregates, but they will have to import them into the area. So there's additional cost, logistical cost to get that there. There's a sustainability impact of doing that. So having it within the area for us, for our asphalt plant on the site, is a real advantage.
And it's certainly one of the only volcanic sites, at least within the region, and possibly only one of a few within the UK as well.
Yeah. So certainly within the region, absolutely, it is the only one. Beyond that, the wider sort of volcanic mineral extraction sites, I wouldn't like to say mainly because I don't know. There will be others probably further north, but certainly within this region, no, we are it's sort of unique to us. So that's a good benefit for
Yeah.
us.
So as well as surfacing material for roads, is there anything else that the material is used for as a more of a solid material or as an aggregate, as
Yeah.
other things it's used for?
Yeah, so it has a. So we also operate within the general aggregate market with. So not only that top surface course, but that's where there's arguably a premium price to that we can get some real economic benefit. But we do also work within, because the geology is quite complex within this area. It's not just a mass block of Silurian andesite. From my point of view, I alluded to my background, and some of the limestones are fairly uniform within the extraction area, and it makes the processing of them fairly consistent. And every site has its challenges, but probably a little bit more consistent here. There are a number of geological rock types within the extraction area, and we really need to sort of cherry pick the right ones. So the ones that aren't necessarily the higher value ones will be able to still have opportunity to utilize that material, and it's right and proper that we do, because we want to maximize the value of the deposit, and it's from a sustainability point of view, we want to make sure that we've got permission to extract this mineral within our mineral planning. And we should make sure we maximize that, because we don't want to go beyond that unnecessarily. So those other products that we're able to extract, that aren't probably as perhaps as premium, then those go into a general aggregate market for building sites and the like. So, there's a bit of a range there, but probably the asphalt is where we really focus our effort.
But as you say, it's a very complicated site down there. The geology down there is fascinating, and there's unfortunately probably not been as much research done on the area as possible. Now, it's old rock, so it's difficult to work with and interpret what's happened to it over geological time. But from a volcanic perspective, it looks like there was a lot going on during this period of time.
Yeah, and as I alluded to earlier on, probably geology. I don't have any academic qualifications within sort of the geology area, but what I have learned in my time here, very much for me, it's about how we extract that mineral and the process around it. What I found is that the variety of rock types within the area have made the extraction challenging. So there are tuffs, and there's like an agglomerate within the deposit as well. And we have quite a number of geology students come to the site, and we've had people come to visit us, and they're excited by the geological variety and the.
You tell them it's a nightmare.
Essentially, yes. So I've had some people from industry, some of the geologists that turn up, and some consultants, and they're all, "Oh, this is fantastic." I said, "You want to try working it?" But so it presents challenges, but also it is unique, and it is interesting. When I drive around the quarry, you can just see the variation within the rocks. Bench by bench as you go down into the deposit, but also just throughout. So you'll get weathered andesite, you'll get agglomerate, and then you'll move 50 yards on, and you can see the changes in the faces. So it's interesting, but presents us with a challenge each day.
Yeah, you've been there long enough that the novelty of the niceties in the geology has worn off, and you have to think about it from an operational perspective.
Yes, indeed.
VolcaKnowledge is proud to be sponsored by John Wainwright Co through Wainwright Aggregates, and Brunton, Wyoming, making the world's most reliable compasses, professional transits, and navigational tools. Since founding in 1891, John Wainwright Co are one of Southwest England's largest independent quarrying companies. As well as extracting and processing premium basalt from their quarry in Somerset, they produce construction materials and operate a successful contracting division. Let's hear from some of their employees.
My name's Darren Curl, and I'm the sales office manager at John Wainwright's. One of the great benefits of working for a company like John Wainwright is that it's open to change. And for me, this is one of the biggest differences compared to our competitors, is that we're willing to explore new ways of manufacturing, new ways of processing, and allow us to stay ahead of our competitors. Customer experience has always been an important part of my previous roles, and what I really enjoy about working in this industry is it allows me to really look at how we can enhance our customer experience for all of our customers. Within my role as the sales office manager, it does give me the ability to travel to our other sites, which allows me to engage with other members of staff and talk about how we can do things differently and how we can implement change. So for anybody who is looking to get into this industry, there's a variety of roles here, whether it's finance, sales, or whether you want to drive a dumper or operate an asphalt plant. There's lots of variety, and there's also lots of opportunities for career progression.
I'd be curious if you could almost just tell what that process actually is, from the rock in the ground up until the final product. Like what actually happens along the way from basically from the very beginning.
So, so at the moment, we're in a position at the moment where we're looking. This site has been here for over. So I think that John Wainwright and Co is over 130 years as a business. On this site, I think they started in 1898 mineral
Wow.
extraction. So a considerable period of time. And it's a finite resource. My job and the quarry manager's job is one to make sure we get best value out of that rock wherever possible. So we've got to be really careful in the way that we extract it. We make sure that the geotechnical design of the quarry is appropriate for safety and stability, but also to maximise that resource. We're in the process of an extension planning at the moment, and the first thing we would do is do a bit of a engage with consultants on where the potential for further mineral would be. Now you start off with like a bit of an investigation, sort of a paper-based exercise, really looking at British Geological Survey information, looking at local mapping and that type of thing, and then we do trial pits within adjacent land to get an indication in the first instance to then determine whether or not we're going to then core drill that area. And the core drilling is probably the area that we get the most data, and we will end up drilling a series of holes based on advice from geotechnical specialists and geological specialists to say, well, if you drill, let's say, 6 holes at this orientation through the deposit, then we'll get a nice, we don't want to drill any holes for the fun of it because there's a cost to it. So it's about getting as maximum amount of information within that area as we can, building up a picture of what the geology is like. I think at the moment we've got sort of theoretically about 6 different rock types within our extraction area, the andesite being the main one. But what we want to do is really focus in on that because that's where the economic value is.
It's almost like homing down on the area that you need to then operate in.
So we would core drill, get the data, get the reports, work out whether it's economically viable. Then there's a plan application that goes in, and that's a really important process, not only for us, but to make sure that that we are doing everything that's right and proper, making sure that the biodiversity impact is assessed, all of the environmental impacts of our operation, because clearly there are them. But how can we mitigate against those? So we that plan application will go in place. It will identify what the restoration scheme is before we've even started doing any extraction. We need to determine what it's going to look like at the end of it. That will also have an idea of how many millions of tons of that of material there is there, and also any waste overburden material. And so there's a lot that goes into the design process. Once we've got our planning, and obviously we've got planning at the moment for the extraction areas that we're in, we would remove the soils, put those to one side, use those as screening banks. You referred earlier on to the fact that they're not very visible, so we try and design it in such a way that the impact is minimised to the local population. And then we would remove any overburden. Hopefully that's as shallow amount as possible, because again, it's the economic sort of impact of that. If you've got tens and tens of meters of uneconomical material, there's a cost to moving that before you get down to the economically viable material. So hopefully that's as shallow as possible. So that's determined, and that comes through the core drilling that we speak about. Then once we've got down to what I would refer to as the rock head, then it's a case of drilling and blasting. So you would drill from the bench above, typically 15 meters, drill down. You would put explosives within, and you'd set that out as a pattern. Through experience, we understand how sort of the gap between each hole, so how many meters between each hole that you would put explosives down. You determine the gap, and what we refer to in the industry is the burden between the free face and where the hole with the explosives is, typically around 4.5 meters, and then 4 meters, so a 4x4 spacing. Some geology will enable, if limestones might be 4.5 meters by 4.5 meters, or some granites might be a tighter formation. Okay. Then you put explosives in there. There'd be a series of, so you use drones to survey that face, put the appropriate explosive quantity, look out for any geological features that may occur, any cavities, any clay, any ash, anything that would create a safety hazard, because safety is of primary importance, especially dealing with explosives. Then you would fire that shot. It's timed in such a way that if you're going to put 3 tons of explosives into a shot, you don't want it all going off at once. So you time each individual hole with effectively a little microchip in the detonator that spreads that out over perhaps a second. So if you ever watched a blast being fired, it tends to go from left to right or right to left, and that then reduces the environmental impact from vibration, because we're monitored on that. So there's a limit set upon us. So that's called the maximum instantaneous charge. We keep that to the minimum we can, and that's monitored on every single blast. That will create a rock pile. That rock pile then is picked up by mechanical excavator, put into dump trucks on this site, and hauled to a processing plant. That processing plant effectively, and when I say this, it makes it sound so easy. There are some challenges associated with it, but we end up with big rocks being reduced down in size and screened to an appropriate size for our customers' needs. So, we will take rocks the size of fridge freezers from the blast, and the blasting is the most efficient sort of form of crushing. So we want to try and do that in the right way. So that spacing reduces it down to a point, and then we'll put it through our production process to reduce it down again to an appropriate size that we're able to put it into an asphalt plant for the specifications that they need, or within a construction environment for the specifications they need. So we're trying to hit the right specifications. What we don't want to do is just make rocks that don't have an output at the end of them. We only service a market, and we need to make sure that we're doing that and try and avoid any byproduct wherever possible. That's a challenge for some sites, because inevitably when you do a crushing process, you end up with certain sizes that don't sell as well as others. So that's it. And then there's a whole, and you alluded to, the sales, the marketing, the accounts, all of the what I would refer to as the support services within one of our in our organisation and in all organisations for them to function. So there's a lot of other parts to a lot of other plates that are being spun at the same time.
Yeah, it's a big process, and there's mentioned a couple of things there that really jumped out to me. One was just the science of behind the detonation, the explosives, for so many reasons. One, for trying to maximize the output and the ability for you to not need to process the material as much. So that's a consideration. And then also the restoration and the environmental impact just behind the vibration and the sound, I guess. So it's nice to hear that that's actually a very big factor in not just you going, okay, let's blast over there, let's blast over there.
Yeah, there's a number of things we need to consider. The geology has an impact on the way that we operate. And it'll have an impact on the impact on what we do. So some sites I've worked at in the past, they will have certain bench heights, certain face heights, and the orientation in which you would work a deposit because of the geology, so that you can maximise what you're doing, but also the impact of it. If you've got properties on in a northerly direction and you're blasting north to south, then that vibration would probably go through the rock. Now, if you can change the orientation of your operation and you could blast east to west, then that might reduce that impact, that peak particle velocity that's felt by those neighbours.
Interesting.
So there's lots of things to consider as part of that. One of the things we can't control is the weather sometimes, and you often find that we get air overpressure. And if you get low cloud, then the air overpressure will go up, hit that cloud, come down, and that can cause an impact on local communities. We're fairly fortunate here that we have a really good relationship with local stakeholders, and pleased to say we don't suffer in that respect. I have been on sites that, whilst we have always met the legal requirements and the planning requirements, the human perception is the challenge, and that's one of the things that at the moment I don't have to worry about too much here, but certainly some sites have issues with that.
Yes, particularly as places just continue to build and develop and develop and develop. So the quarry has, as you said, if the quarry might have been there for 100, 150 years in many of these cases, but the spread of basically urbanization is you
Yeah.
can't move the hole in the ground.
No, absolutely,
So
and that challenge, the way in which we interact with those local stakeholders is really important. We have regular meetings, as most quarry companies do. In fairness, as an industry, we recognise that there is an impact, and we're always looking to try and mitigate that where we can. That said, the material is a really important part of modern society, and the roads in which we drive on, the houses, the vehicles, mineral products go into all of these things. So it's about doing it as sustainably as possible and
yeah.
reducing that impact wherever we can on the local communities.
Yeah, and as well as that, I know you also do as an independent company. You've got that control to give back a lot, not just in terms of the environment and employment, but also I know you have a foundation which helps support efforts, and some of those are community driven projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that we recognise that that there is an impact to what we do, and we want to support the local communities wherever we can. So there is our Futures Foundation, and that's something that we have some trustees there that will look at applications from the local communities, the local parishes, and they will be looking for support with certain projects that they're doing or areas that they need some support, and we will look at that, and wherever we can help, we certainly do. Yeah, it's nice to do something for the local community where we can, because we have an impact on it. We try to minimise that wherever possible, but yeah, that's fairly sort of commonplace, I would say, within our industry. So yeah.
Yeah, but as you said in the last couple of minutes here, as you mentioned as well, this industry, even though it's something that people might consider quite an old school kind of extraction and industry, it's still modernizing. You mentioned you're now using drones as your initial surveying capabilities, and I imagine the science of detonation has also improved over the years as well, so it's still evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology it impacts on all industries, and we're no different. And we try to embrace and there are real benefits. So it's identifying what those benefits are, utilizing them. Where we used to have stock surveys done by a chap walking around, initially measuring out, and then you would use probably 20, 30 years ago, start using GPS. And now we fly drones to do our stock surveys. That eliminates, from a safety point of view, that individual having to be in that environment with mobile equipment. So there's a health and safety benefit, there's a time benefit. And so people will come in and do that for us. Say with the blasting, again, it's from a safety aspect. Back in the day, they would be doing it, and you'd get something called fly rock, where they perhaps didn't get that burden between the column with the explosives in and the rock face, where we're saying it should be a minimum of, let's say, 4 meters or minimum of 3.5 meters. They probably didn't get that quite right, and that might have narrowed down. And then all of a sudden, that energy within that explosive pushes that rock, and it goes and it creates a fly rock situation. Go back
Right.
60 years ago, that was probably something that happened. I wouldn't say regularly. I mean, I don't know, before my time, but a lot of effort goes into getting that right, and that technology really helps in that respect. And within the process that we work with, there's people will see EVs on the public highway. That's starting to come into our industry now. There are some of our OEMs, the manufacturers of the process equipment. There are pieces of equipment coming into our industry that are electrified, and
Okay.
we're looking at wherever possible about how we can do things more efficiently. Maybe if some of these big earth moving pieces of equipment aren't necessarily fully electrified, then how hybrid are they? How many litres per hour are they operating at, and how can we reduce that down? So there's lots of things we do, and the technology supports us with that, and that's an ongoing process.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, it's good to hear that it's still evolving, because it's still an industry that is well needed throughout the entire country. We need the materials. For, as you say, the growth of building materials as such. So we still need this. So it's good to hear that it's still modernizing and changing as the years go on. So as a final point to wrap us up, you said you came from a slightly different background into this kind of industry of geology, but you've learned a lot along the way as well. I think you say it's giving you a chance to see things through a slightly different eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the geology has been something that I've learned is a massive part of it. Ultimately the quarry's there because there's an economic opportunity to utilise it within that area. But what I've found is my interest in the geology, and much to my wife's whenever we go away, inevitably I sort of just have a knack of identifying local quarries or quarried areas, or I'll be looking at the geology and I'll be looking at the geotechnical challenges. And I can't help myself now. So yeah, it's
can never escape. But I think it's a blessing, not a curse, to have a different eye on the natural world.
Yes.
But as you say, sometimes it can make it a challenge for others who come along with you, and wherever you go, all you're doing is looking at the rocks.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I have to say.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ben. It's been really good to hear these kind of insights into this industry that people know obviously exists, but I think they might not know, the specifics and the details of what goes into it. So it's been really interesting to hear that process and all the diversity of, the different jobs that are involved in making this kind of operation happen.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of VolcaKnowledge. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of VolcaKnowledge. Remember, you can catch all of our previous episodes either through our website, www.volcaknowledge.com, or you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you stream your favourite podcasts. You can also watch all of our episodes on our YouTube channel, VolcaKnowledge, and don't forget to sign up to our social media channels at VolcaKnowledge through Instagram and Blue Sky. Please leave us any feedback and comments and topics maybe you want to see on a future episode. Thank you for joining, and see you next time.